On today's episode of Beyond the Lens, I figured I would do something a little different for our cold open. Without further ado, here it is. Next year I kept saying hello to Boston. It seemed that my whole message was lost in the noise, but then a miracle happened. Marcy zoomed up and sent me a message. Told me the goals weren't over yet. Change came in a new show called Fetch. I liked it and thought this is awesome. Can't wait to move to Boston. But as I grew older, things started to change. You're probably wondering, what was up with that? Your ears are not deceiving you. That is my song, Boston by A Brighter Escape. For those who know the meaning of the song and the topic of today's show, you'll know exactly why I played that snippet. But if not, it will all become clear by the end of the episode. Enjoy the show. Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast. Hi, and welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond the Lens. Once again, I am joined by PJ.
Hello, everybody.
And today we will be talking about Fetch with Ruff Ruffman. So I wanted to ask you, PJ, how familiar are you with Fetch?
Not very. I have heard of the show, and I used to see ads for it, or I guess commercials for it all the time when I was a kid, because obviously I grew up with PBS. But I just never got around to actually sticking around and watching the show. So yeah, I'm kind of unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, so I'm actually very familiar with the show Fetch. If you recall all the way back to the first episode of Beyond the Lens, we talked about Zoom.
That's right.
And so back when I found out that Zoom was canceled in 2005, I was 10 years old and I kept like emailing WGBH constantly, so essentially sort of spamming them, trying to get Zoom back on the air. And that was partly motivated because I wanted to actually be on Zoom. Then shortly before Fetch premiered, I actually got an email from Marcy Gunther, who was a producer on both Zoom and Fetch. And she essentially talked to me about the new show and what it would be like. So I watched it and I actually liked it even more than Zoom. At one point I wanted to be on Fetch as well, but that obviously never panned out.
That's still really cool. You got an email from like the actual producer, though.
Yeah. And like I said, being on Fetch like never panned out for me, partly because I would have had to have moved to Boston just to audition for the show.
Oh yeah, that's kind of tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I knew I the only reason why I knew that Fetch was similar to Zoom was because of you. Like based on the commercial that I watched, like I would have had no idea that it was like a hybrid reality slash cartoon show. I thought it was just like a dog and his adventures characters and this cartoon world. I had no idea that it involved real contestants. So that alone was enough to interest me in kind of watching like half an episode right before we recorded. But I loved the format, and I never grew up with Zoom either because I was later 90s kid. But the concept of trying to revive Zoom is pretty neat, especially in a different format.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of lay some of the groundwork for the behind the scenes as far as how Fetch came about. Obviously, Fetch was produced with the same people behind Zoom. And Zoom was this reality show by kids for kids, which featured a group of 7 kids doing educational activities sent in by TV viewers, and they included things like plays, games, crafts, science experiments, recipes, etc. And Zoom's ratings actually started to fall in 2002, which was roughly around the same time PBS Kids ratings started to decline overall.
Hmm.
And by 2004, PBS and WGBH essentially decided to pull the plug on Zoom and reinvent the show from the ground up. And so there was a Boston Globe article in 2004 in December that talked about Zoom's cancellation, and it talked about a show that they had envisioned as a replacement for Zoom called Hot Seat, which was set to follow 5 children as they take on a series of challenges that empower them to take risks and solve problems. That's how the Boston Globe described it. And I'm not sure if this is still up anywhere, but several years ago, I came across a grant application from the National Science Foundation that revealed that at the time they were sort of envisioning Hot Seat to sort of be this weird backdoor season. So there'd be like a Zoom season 8, and that'd be the same thing as Hot Seat season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the show continued to be developed, and the number of kids increased to 6. And then they created the character of Ruff Ruffman, who was an animated dog who, according to the theme song, came up with the idea for the game show and pitched it to executives, and they were surprised to learn that it was a dog that signed the contract and was producing the show. So Ruff became this animated host, and the 6 contestants competed for points during challenges. I think the show, commercial or whatever, marketing wise, described it as sort of like a reality game show, with the final episode essentially determining who would be crowned champion of that season. They hired comedian and voice actor Jim Conroy to be the voice of Ruff Ruffman. And one thing that I'm not sure if you noticed at all from the half episode you watched, there was sort of like a cousin of Ruff named Murray.
Yeah, I didn't get to that part. So
Uh,
I'm just familiar with Ruff, and I know there's other animated characters in the show, but I didn't get around to seeing them.
well, this character isn't animated. It was a real life dog who
Oh, okay,
actually
cool.
interacted with the contestants out on challenges. He was sort of like Ruff's assistant.
Nice.
And so he was on the show for the first 3 seasons, and then after filming season 3, the dog who played Murray passed away, and so they brought on
Oh
a new
no.
dog. They brought on
Hmm.
a new dog called Tank, who sort of came on to take his place. I guess my question to you is, from what you've seen, what did you think of Fetch, and did you think it was a worthy successor to Zoom?
I mean, as someone who loves game shows, like I grew up watching Nickelodeon Gas, with Global Guts,
Hmm.
Legends of the Hidden Temple. I grew up loving game shows. I still watch them to this day. Had I known about this show, I would have watched it endlessly. I think it's a great concept. It's a great spinoff on Zoom, even though like I said, I didn't grow up with the original Zoom. The fact that they revived it and made it, they kind of put like a fresh modern twist on it, making it into that sort of game show and adding Ruff as the animated character. I think it was really refreshing, and I love the concept. Does it live up to the expectations of Zoom? Maybe not, but kind of in a good way, because it's still like its own standalone show. So overall, I think it's a great concept, and I wish I would have watched it growing up.
Hmm. And it definitely was a great concept, which sort of takes me to the next part, which is sort of the behind the scenes aspect as far as like how each season or episode or whatever was made. So after all the contestants are cast, what would actually be produced first was like all of the on the field stuff that showed the challenges. It was sort of shot documentary style. I guess you could break down the kinds of challenges into three kinds. There were a number of individual challenges where it would just be one cast member doing something,
Mhm.
learning something new or whatever. Then most of them were like a small group of cast members who were doing the challenge. And then also every season there was a few where there was challenges that encompassed the whole cast for that season. And each cast member had roughly 13 challenges each season. Each com- each challenge they could earn up to 100 points.
Mhm.
And then after that, that's when they went and filmed all the in-studio segments with the contestants essentially sort of acting out the scenes as if they were on a real game show. Jim
Mhm.
Conroy was in a booth nearby, and that enabled them to interact with the fetchers in real time.
Yeah, I was wondering how he did that because I knew it obviously wasn't pre-recorded, but Ruff is an animated character, so I was like, how is he able to interact with the kids? So that makes sense.
Mhm. And then some of the contestants, I don't know if you got to this part in whatever episode you were watching, they some of them stay behind and participate in a halftime quiz show.
Yeah, I didn't get to that part, unfortunately.
So the quiz show, they can earn up to 50 points. They essentially answer 10 questions about what they learned from the challenges so far. And each question's worth 5 points apiece. Then there's this fetch fairness guarantee where essentially all contestants will have competed for the same number of points before the final episode for that season.
Mhm.
Uh,
So it's the same six kids for an entire season.
yeah,
Oh, okay, that's cool.
and so roughly each contestant would do the quiz show about 6 times each season.
Mhm.
Those numbers sort of change each season. We'll get to why in a little bit. And so then the final episode each season had a series of elimination challenges to determine who would be the winner. So the way that worked is usually the fifth and sixth place contestant from the point totals overall would compete first in some sort of race or some sort of challenge of some sort. And whoever won that round would move on to compete with the fourth place person at the time. And whoever won that would move on to essentially work with the remaining three contestants that hadn't competed yet.
Mhm.
Uh, and they'd break those four up into two teams, and those two teams would compete in team challenge, and whichever team won that round would then go. Those team members would then go head to head in like a final face-off quiz sort of thing, and whoever won that, uh,
Was like the grand champion.
yeah, for the season, yeah,
Okay. That's an interesting format.
yeah.
So let me ask you, Rico, in terms of it being compared to Zoom, like did you enjoy the show as much as you did with Zoom? Or what do you think of Ruff Ruffman overall?
Hmm. I mean, I liked Ruff Ruffman. It, I guess, at the time, I actually liked Fetch better than Zoom. Uh, but even looking back now, I can see that like Zoom and Fetch were like their own entities in a sense.
Hmm.
There were things that I liked about Zoom that weren't in Fetch, and there were things that I liked about Fetch that weren't in Zoom. So,
Yeah, like they both had their unique take on similar
mm,
things. Like how like I see where the format was going with Fetch and seeing how it compared to Zoom, but like I said, it had that twist on it. So it's like they were the same show, but like different format. It's just very interesting to me because like usually when you do a spin-off show, they try to have like the same elements or keep something the same because that's what people liked the first time. I
Mhm.
appreciate how it seems like Fetch kind of decided to do that twist and somehow it paid off.
Yeah, I guess I could bring up because the email that I got from that producer, I got that email up now. She sort of talks about the similarities between Zoom as well as what they did to sort of create a new spin on it. So she says, quote, "We think that Fetch combines the elements we love about Zoom, real kids engaging in educational activities and a robust science curriculum with a whole new spin, an animated dog host named Ruff Ruffman." So,
Yeah, I think that they pretty much nailed it. It sounds like.
mhm. Yeah, at so once all the in-studio segments were filmed and then Jim Connor recorded all the lines for the other animated bits, at that point the footage and the audio were all sent to a company called Global Mechanic who would animate the Rough Reference segment and edit the show together. Uh, and so it was a pretty complex process. It took a number of months to put a whole season together.
Oh yeah, I mean like hybrid shows take the longest time. I know that for I mean one of my favorite movies growing up was Mary Poppins and it was a hybrid animated
Mhm.
live action movie that took a long time to put together. I can only well and granted technology is better now, but I can
Yeah.
only imagine how long it took to film each episode.
I think I could be wrong, but it sounds like they essentially filmed the entire season at a time, and then it was in the editing where they put it together in one episode.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, because if you filmed each episode individually, like over a period of time, that would take way too long. And I know
Yeah.
that for game shows, it is standard to kind of film multiple episodes in one day just to kind of, get it out of the
Hmm.
way and edit it quicker. So yeah, that would make sense to me.
Hmm.
It wasn't like an anime. Like I know we talked about Fetch a little bit when we filmed Zoom. I still
Hmm.
remember that. And I
Hmm.
remember you saying it was a spin-off of Zoom, but I was like, oh, I wonder like how it is. And because I always thought like seeing like I said, commercials for Fetch, I thought it was like some kind of animated series. So I thought everything was gonna be animated. So I was like pleasantly surprised when these real life kids came on the show and I was like, oh, okay, this is a
Hmm.
hybrid. Nice. I don't really think there were too well. There was like Sesame Street where there were puppet. There's like a huge puppet craze in like the early 2000s too. Well,
Hmm.
and Sesame Street's way older than that, but there was like
Yeah.
Play with Me Sesame, which we briefly talked about, and Bear in the Big Blue House was another one. Barney. There was a bunch of shows like that, but in terms of like animated series, I think this is one of the few that I can think of off the top of my head. So it was a refreshing change to see that.
Yeah. So season one mostly focused on like the ins and outs of Rough running the show, and then I don't know if you knew this. You probably don't. The contestant Taylor from season one.
Oh, I feel like you've mentioned this already and I've already forgot.
Yeah, she was uh on Zoom in the final season as well.
That's right. Yeah, that's really cool.
Hmm. And so season one essentially sort of set up sort of the groundwork for what the show could be. When each season sort of added a new layer to it in a sense.
Mhm.
Like for season two, they introduced the new animated character named Blossom, who was a cat intern. Uh, Unlike Ruff, she doesn't really speak. There's like some sound effects and stuff, but Ruff and Blossom was sort of able to communicate in a sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Uh,
think that was the animated character I was thinking of that I didn't get around to seeing, but I knew there was like at least one other
mhm.
in that show.
No, there's a bunch. Usually, if there's any sort of voice to them, it's usually all done by Jim Conroy doing some
Oh, I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
some sort of impression or accent or something. Blossom was an intern for season two. when season 2 ended, it was sort of, I don't know if I want to say cliffhanger, but it was sort of left open ended whether or not Blossom
Mhm.
would return for the 3rd season. And season 3 had Blossom essentially promoted to be president of the network.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then Ruff decided to hire a new intern named Chet. Chet was a mouse who frequently misunderstood directions and messed things up for Ruff with comedic results.
Now I'm mad. I didn't see the show because that sounds a lot like me, and I probably would have said, "Oh, hey, I can finally relate to a character."
Uh,
Oh, that's funny.
uh, uh, when season 3 ended, at the tail end, it had Ruff receive a fax essentially saying that he was fired from the show.
What?
And,
That's kind of strange.
yeah, and so season 4 actually did open with an all animated special, where Ruff tries to get his job back. Uh, this is also how they sort of wrote out Murray. So uh, in the middle of the animated episode, Murray unexpectedly quits and he finds Tank as a replacement. Uh, but then I guess spoiler alert, it's revealed by the end of the episode that the fax was just a trick from one of Ruff's frequent nemesises, Spotnik,
Oh,
who
okay.
he sent him that fax was just distract Ruff and essentially steal away from Ruff's crush, Charlene, to take him to like a ball of some sort. From then on out, because that first episode of that season ended with Ruff calling all the contestants of the season, telling them they were going to be on Fetch. And then from then on out, season 4 was mostly, I'd say, a regular season. I mean, there was sort of an overarching plot where Ruff searches for something called the Helmet of Victory, but it's not as big, I guess, of an overarching plot compared to the next season, whereas season 4 ends with sort of an unexpected twist. Ruff learns that his parents, who were thought to be deceased, are actually alive.
Oh, okay.
And so that sets up the overarching storyline for season 5, where Ruff continues to search for his parents, as well as a new show that's actually in competition to Fetch in the universe. It's called Go Get It with Tom and Trixie. It's essentially like a copycat game show
Hmm.
that's run by a duo of cats. And so in the universe, it actually becomes a lot more popular than Fetch. I think notably, in earlier seasons, we're introduced to a character, Grandma Ruffman, who's Ruff's grandmother,
Hmm.
and she's like frequently sort of going, I don't know how to describe this, like frequently like sort of looking down on Ruff, like not really watching his show, uh, asking if he's gonna get a real job, that sort of thing. And
Like
then
being reluctant.
I don't know, reluctant, more like slightly judgmental in a sense.
Oh, okay.
And so when Go Get It is introduced in the first episode, it's features a call from his grandma, essentially singing heaps and praises about Go Get It and asking if he's going to incorporate some of to like take some tips from that show to incorporate in his own show. So that sort of plays into the popularity and sort of that aspect of things.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how like the end of each season has some sort of thing to keep viewers engaged.
Yeah. Uh, and
But also I was laughing at like the sorry to interrupt you, but it's like I was laughing at the whole firing thing because it's like, oh, that's kind of a hard concept for some kids to follow. But then I think I remember reading that like the contestants on the show were ages like 10 to 14. So they
Yeah,
seemed old enough to understand that, but it's like I wonder who the target audience was.
I think I read somewhere that it was targeting like children 6 to 11, so it's a slightly older demographic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people who watch Zoom would obviously be older, and then oh,
Mhm.
okay.
And so season 5 opens essentially with Ruff having not even begun the audition process yet, like in universe, uh, and realizing that it's so time to premiere season 5. It doesn't really show that big of an audition process, but it shows like sort of house interviews with the contestants, so showing them like what their life like is at home in
Oh,
their
so like they
room.
sent in like not an audition tape, but like just, oh hey, this is me, like this is what I do, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I could be wrong, but sort of the like if I was the one producing this, the way I would have seen it would be like after completing the cast of auditions, I would not like tell the contestants themselves, like maybe tell the parents, but don't tell the contestants themselves that they've made it onto the show, but then sort of like have this be like this is the final round of auditions. We're gonna have send like a camera crew to your house and we're gonna film sort of an interview and a tour of your room and stuff like that to see if you're fit for the show. And then obviously in the middle they get the call from Ruff Ruffman saying they're gonna be on Fetch. So that would be how I would do it. I don't know if that's how they did it,
Mhm.
but
Well, I know for because I'm an actor, I've been to multiple auditions, and
mhm,
sometimes I think I've talked about this on the podcast in another episode, but sometimes there'll be a call that goes out and says, well, we're looking for real people, not actors, but it's going out to a bunch of actors. So maybe they're looking for someone who just enjoys game shows or kind of fits the criteria another way. Like I know for one of those type auditions, it was for like some kind of car commercial. So they're like, oh, we're looking for like real Subaru or Toyota owners to come and talk about how great this car is. So maybe it was a similar process to that. Like these were kids represented by an agency, or maybe they were real kids. I don't know. It just intrigues me how they got kids to audition or if they just put out an open casting call and we're looking for real kids. All I know is I remember also reading online that the show was completely unscripted for the kids. They just walked in not knowing what to expect. And they just kind of, did what they did. And it seemed very real and made the show more engaging for sure.
I'm inclined to say that was sort of an open call for auditions, and honestly, kids in the Boston area would try out for the show.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like one way or the other. I'm just trying to think of what way it did go.
So by the end of the first episode, it's revealed that Chat sends sort of this driver the wrong coordinates. It's where the fishes are picked up on. It's not like a bus or anything. It's actually like a duck boat. You know those things that drive on the road and then they can go in the water.
Hmm.
And so and so after after all the fishes for that season are picked up, uh, Chet sends them the wrong coordinates, which is tied to the mystery of Russ's parents, and so they end up unexpectedly on an island, and that's sort of where the episode ends as a cliffhanger, like how is Ruff gonna get the Fetchers back?
Hmm.
And basically, they the second episode reveals that they're on uh a place called Game Show Island, and so the challenges that essentially show them like how to get off, and so they do make it off, and they in the episode they go back to Studio G. So and so from there, the rest of the season is mostly normal from then on, apart from like that overarching storyline with searching for us parents and uh the rise of the new show, Go Get It. And so leading up to the finale, it's discovered that there's this organization called PERS. I think it's I'm trying to remember what it stands for. Pussycat Underground Rather Rotten Society. It's like a shadowy secret society run by cats. They're the organization behind Go Get It, and it's revealed that like the goal of the organization is essentially to take over the world.
And that reminds me of another certain organization, but that's another topic we can talk about another day.
Yeah. It's revealed that Ruff's parents, who were revealed earlier to be also game show hosts, that they weren't just game show hosts, they were also spies. And so that leads into the finale with the bigger twist, which revealed that Tom and Trixie, the hosts for Go Get It, were actually Ruff's parents disguised all along. And so
Oh,
they sort of help take down Purr's, foil their evil plan, and and so and so that so that's how Ruff ends up reuniting with his parents.
and that was the end of the series overall, right?
Yeah, season 5 ends with Ruff saying goodbye to all his fans, but believe it or not, there was actually auditions for a season 6, but the lack of funding prevented them from being able to produce that season. So,
Well,
uh,
I think I'd be satisfied with that ending. I mean, that's a better ending than a lot of shows that are out there.
yeah, yeah. So,
But yeah, it is unfortunate that they never got that 6th season off the ground.
yeah, and so even though there wasn't a 6th season, the show reran for many years. I think it ran as late as like 2017 on like the 24/7 PBS Kids channel.
Oh wow, that is a long time for a show that, yeah, 7 years off air, and they ran for that long. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So also there was actually a number of spin-off media that was created mostly online. There was in 2011 a 20-part interactive video game on the website called Spy Hounds. I think it was sort of created in lieu of season 6. There also was a proposed spin-off TV show based on that video game, but that never got off the ground either.
Mhm. And this is
But
all because of Zoom. That's just crazy to me.
yeah, and so there were other web series that were created. There was one called Ruff Ruffman Humble Media Genius, which features Ruff Ruffman, but more just in his animated capacity, where he teaches kids about media literacy and internet safety.
Oh, that's cool.
And then finally, there was another web series spin-off called The Ruff Ruffman Show, which showed like kids at home like doing real science experiments and demonstrations that they could do around the house. Ruff interviews them sort of documentary style.
Nice.
So did you check out any spin-off media?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear of these spin-off series. I mean, I thought like Fetch was the spin-off series of Zoom. I didn't think there'd be spin-offs of a spin-off, so I unfortunately haven't checked any of them out.
And all of the spin-offs that I just described, was there any that sounded more interesting to you?
I mean, I like the sound of all of them. I was definitely like a science experiment kid. I had a bunch of science kits growing up. And obviously I'm a Gen Z kid, so like internet was always my thing. No, I did not ask my parents' permission before going online. My mom didn't care. I would always be on the computer 24/7 playing like every single kid website there was. Cartoon Network. There was like a Barbie and Polly Pocket website too. There was Postopia. So like I grew up with pretty much everything. And I'm sad that I didn't hear of that one either. That's crazy to me. But yeah, all of those sound amazing. I probably would have loved them one way or another.
Mhm.
What about you? Do you have a favorite?
Hmm. I'd probably go with the Ruff Ruffman show. It's a little bit closer uh in style to Fetch, and there's that hint of Zoom as well as like other other PBS shows that I know of that were produced by WGBH. Like Arthur had those Now a Word from Us kids segments that reminded me of
That's
that.
right.
And it also reminded me of of a spin-off of Arthur Postcards from Buster, which was another animated
Yes, I remember
live-action
that one. Yeah.
hybrid where Buster like interacts with real kids around the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seemed like a pretty interesting concept. Fun way to like create a whole new web series that sort of encompassed all those different shows and vibes and things.
Yeah.
And so one of my last questions before we wrap up is what do you think of like the legacy of the brand or Ruff Ruffman just in general?
Well, it sounds like the show still had like a major impact on a lot of people. And the fact that it ran for actually, I'd say, it was 5 seasons. That's still a pretty good run, especially since a lot of kids shows only have like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And it still ran on air for 7 years. So overall, that was about a little over 10 years. I'd say that's pretty impressive. I'd say that's a big impact.
Mhm.
And I'm mad that you bring up all these great kid shows that I somehow never sat down to watch, and I'm mad again that I never saw this show because it sounds amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, so do you have like any last thoughts about Fetch with Ruff Ruffman?
I mean, I like the idea of the show. It definitely hybrids. How do I put this? The hybrid of the cartoon and the real life characters, or I guess kids, and it being a game show format is pretty cool. I don't believe there's been anything like that before. And yeah, I now I'm gonna have to go back and watch it just for fun because I'm a game show nerd. I learn a lot from them. And I still actually I think what platform? I think it's on, maybe it's on Paramount Plus, but they have Legends of the Hidden Temple and like all the other Nickelodeon gas shows on there that I still go back and rewatch. So like I'm just gonna now watch the show for the heck of it because why not? It sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, there isn't really any other show like Fetch, like in recent memory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even I could be wrong, but even PBS seems to be skewing more toward like when it comes to children's shows, aiming for like the very young demographic. There isn't really a whole lot nowadays that aims for a more older audience like Fetch did.
Yeah, in fact, I now that you mentioned that, I cannot, there's not like a show that is centered toward preteens that comes to my mind right now that's currently still on air,
I
like on
mean,
any channel for that matter.
yeah, I mean, the closest thing I can think of, at least on PBS, that was aimed sort of preteen wise was Arthur, but that just ended this year. So,
I know, and I was so sad.
uh, uh,
And now everyone's stuck watching Netflix and Coco Melon and all those other shows that are like way too babyish. I'm like, nope, I'm sorry.
yeah,
What happened to the good old days? I feel old
yeah,
already.
mhm, yeah. So, on that note, that that wraps up today's episode of Beyond the Lens. Join us next time where we'll be doing uh
Phineas and Ferb.
yeah, your pick.
Yay.
So hopefully you'll tune in then, and we'll see you later then. Bye.
See you all next time.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's WERQ by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Record Entertainment production. Which I'm looking at my schedule now. It looks like autocorrect changed it to phones and Ferb.
I noticed that and I wasn't going to say anything because it actually sounds pretty funny.
Yeah.
We all had trouble spelling his name at one point. So
Yeah.
I don't blame autocorrect.
Yeah.